questions, I'm not gonna wait to the end. You can go ahead and just ask me. We'll just stay on this till about 12, and then we'll go back to the entrepreneurship topic, okay? All right, so estate planning, it's a combination of different legal documents. It's not just one thing or the other. It's not just a will. It may not just be a trust, but it's understanding how each document works for the purposes of the protection of what you own and directives to being able to say what you want to happen to your estate assets and even to yourself. So estate planning, we already talked about, protects your financial future for your family. It avoids any going to court, back and forth to court. One of the things people that are most common, you might have heard when somebody dies, the assets get taken by the state. Most of the time, it's just a house or whatever that person owns, and the family has to go back and forth to court. Now, every state, people have to understand things are state specific. DC has laws, and this area is 3 states. It's DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So depending on where you live, you have to understand the law of where for the assets in the state that it is protecting. So say, for example, you live in DC, but you have a property in Maryland, you need to make sure whatever you're establishing in DC also covers the laws for Maryland. Now, this is basically the same time. It's just making sure everything that you want fulfilled gets fulfilled, it goes to the right person, it gets managed appropriately, and it gets distributed in the right way. Now, there are myths, because I know when I was growing up, I thought estate planning was only for wealthy or what we consider rich people. And that's not true. It's a lie. You can protect you can think something you have as an asset. I had somebody that had an album collection. We got it appraised, and he had an autograph from actual music artists. So it had $150,000 value. So he was able to include that in that trust and say if he passes, his son, not his son, he said he would never give his record collections to his son. He said his grandson had an interest in music, and that was his passion, so he would leave it to his grandson. So that allows that to happen. So nobody in the family fights. We know where the stuff is going. He was going to leave it to that person. This is the other myth. I thought when I was younger, I'm too young. I'm not thinking about my long-term planning. I will say, look at your face. When I was 20, I was trying to make it to 30. So I said, I have friends getting shot. I was like, I'm in the streets, and I was so about my business. But I was like, I'm trying to get money quick. I'm trying to be a millionaire, but I wasn't thinking about planning. I'm not going to leave this earth. Nobody's planning for that. Nobody's thinking about that. Retirement accounts. So some of the stuff we went over yesterday, if you remember in our class, we talked about the different ways you can long-term save. Now, like I said, I don't like the word retirement anymore. Long-term savings, you don't have to wait till retirement to use. You just have to find tax ways to avoid penalties to use the money or leverage it while you're still living. So estate planning, you can cover all the CDs, annuities, stocks, portfolios. It can all be within that particular estate plan. So a lot of times people think it's the beneficiary in the estate plan. No, the estate plan can own the actual asset. At the bank, you could go to the bank and say, I have a trust. Put the account in the name of the trust instead of my personal name. So it takes it out of your personal liability. So somebody say, I want to sue you because you did X, Y, Z to me tomorrow. You can't sue me. You can't take nothing because I own nothing. I control everything. So bipartisan estate plan is the actual written document, the execution, also get a notary. Hey, welcome back. How are you? Could you go ahead and sign in for me today? And then since you did make it back, we do have a gift for you. And you might have to get some more backs together. We actually have some people showing up. All right. Also, when you have it, in order for it to be enforced, you have to get it notarized. So notary means you're signing. There's a physical record of you signing for it, saying this is what I want. And you also have to have witnesses. Now, in certain states, they might only require one witness. I recommend two. I am a notary. I notarize many trusts and estate plans. Having two is better. Sometimes when you go to the bank, when I used to work at the bank, I will pull my coworker over and see if they feel comfortable with being a witness for this document. So you can find a witness. It doesn't have to be somebody you know, but somebody has to say, I saw this person sign for it. The other part is last will and testament. So last will and testament is important, like, just, you wanna be able to say, hey, this is what I want to happen in this situation. Last will is not just about money and assets. It's actually saying what you want to happen for not just things, it could be people. People can leave behind children that are under the age of 18. And you wanna say, hey, this is how I want this handled. This is where I want this person to be situated. If this person's gonna go to college, I want you to do X, Y, Z for them. So you can say what you want. In some situations, I've had parents say, I don't think my child is responsible. So maybe they wanna delay the way the, benefits are paid out. They may say this person has to take financial literacy courses before we entrust you with my inheritance. They can say, I want distributions at age 25, age 30. You can make it spread out. It doesn't have to be at one time. TK's recording, but his mother, what she did for him, she made sure the payments were incremental. So he can't go call the investment firm or the bank or the insurance company and say, I want the whole lump sum all at one time. They restrict that because it was said to be annuitized, which is another name for getting incremental payments, not having the money at one time. So it kind of ensures that your money just isn't going to be squandered in one shot, especially if you have somebody in the family that's not responsible or not, doing the right things with the money. Hi, ma'am, how are you? My name is Shantae. You weren't here yesterday, right?
No.
Oh, okay, so make sure you get a folder. All right, and you can go ahead and sign in, and you can just follow along. So for everybody that just walked in, welcome back. We got a little bit of a late start because it was only a couple people. We added in an extra topic today because trust and estate planning was very popular. We're still gonna do the entrepreneurship from 12 to 1, but we just wanted to make sure we just went over some of the basics of what a estate plan looks like and how you would set one up. All right. All right, so last will document, everything I just talked about it, you're pretty much saying what you want to happen or how you want it to happen. You usually appoint a person called an executor. So the executor doesn't necessarily have to be a family member. I know some people, we were just saying, don't trust their family, or maybe family's not responsible. Now, if you are blessed to have a good family, you can appoint your sister, brother. If you're young and you still have a mother or something happens to you, you can do all that. But some people might actually get somebody that's not directly related to the family. I know when I first started, I had my daughter and my best friend. I trust my best friend with my life. I knew she would make good decisions for me. And she might even do better on my behalf than my family would. So that's why I said I started, because you can always change. You can, as long as you're alive, make new people, or whatever you choose to do, add new people, and you wanna make sure you have a successor. Because if something happens to that person before you go away, you wanna make sure there's someone else there that can do the same thing. Another person, if you have the money to do it, you can also hire a legal firm. They can handle your affairs as well. So, like I said, directs assets, property, assigns legal guardianship for children. That's what I was just saying a few minutes ago. Sometimes people pass away at a younger age. So I've seen it many times. My friend she was in a murder-suicide. So she left behind 3 minor children. So they have to be able to say, now they ended up going with the grandmother, but it's better to have something dictated, because if there's nothing in writing, who do they really belong to? What did we just say what happens to assets? They go to the state. The state determines what's going to happen. So you don't want the state to interfere and dictate what's going to happen with your assets, let alone your family members. Customizing it, you're just, I just said an example a few minutes ago. I had somebody that had a album collection that was worth $150,000. So it's sometimes things that may be valuable or invaluable you don't think about, but you wanna say, hey, my necklace goes to this person. This goes to that person. Hey, I have something that was passed down from my grandmother. I want that to go to my great-granddaughter. You just wanna make sure you're able to control how you want things distributed, so nobody's fighting over things. They're not going through your closet and saying, I want this, I want that. Hey, this is what I want to happen. So sometimes you guys think the little details, just have a plan for it. Whatever I have, this is what I want to happen. So the creator of the will just needs to at least be 18 years old. So that's the only really requirement. So we were saying earlier, what are some of the myths of estate planning? Oh, I'm too young to plan. That's not true. It's not for rich people, and it's not for just older people. As soon as you turn 18, I truly believe they should really be teaching this in high school. We are implementing these classes. We have them at Prince George's County Schools, Baltimore City, and other schools in Maryland, where parents and children should be learning together. You should be sitting down like the wealthy people do. They sit down with their kids very young, 7, 8, 9, 10. They teach them credit. These are the things you should be having as teenagers, conversations on how to buy a house, how to buy your own car, how to prepare for your adult life. So I don't care how young you are. I was talking to a college student yesterday. He's still in the house with his parents, but he's starting his credit journey the right way. He has zero debt. His whole life is ahead of him, and he's taking the steps incrementally to credit. Hey, when I graduated college, I just don't want to work for somebody. He wants to come straight out of college and start his own IT business. I had another graduate at Howard University, same thing. She didn't want to go work for a doctor's practice. She was in graduate school working for NIH, got a grant, and she's going to be starting her own practice. But she started the process as 2 years into while she was in school, building her credit. She started annuities. She started her insurance policy. She had multiple bank accounts. She saved up cash reserves 6 months. She actually literally did the whole 9 yards in college. So imagine if everybody and all of our kids could start young, or even we start where we at, we would be in a powerful position years later. And then our children can avoid the things and the pitfalls that we had to go through and be on the right track from day one. And I just said a few minutes ago, I think I talked about that, making sure you get it the document notarized, and 2 witnesses at least. Now, if you die without a will, I think we just talked about that. The state will decide. And I just said it's state by state. So if you live in DC, depending, like we're in the tri-state area, DC has different laws, Maryland has its own laws, and Virginia has its own laws. So you don't want to have to worry about, I got to go back and forth to court to figure out what's going to happen. In some states, you might not ever or see anything. So you don't want to have to go through all that. Now, powers of attorney. This is not talked about a lot. Usually it's talked about the last minute. If any of you have experience dealing with aging parents that have passed, family members, or things of that nature, and you don't even have to pass. It could be that you're still living, but you just can't do things for yourself. When you don't already have that in place, it's so hard. You have to go through so much stress. I talk to attorneys every day that are talking about the things they have to go through when they're in that, I call it the midnight hour, or being reactive and not proactive and not setting that stuff up. And they have to go back and try to unravel all that for them while they're already going through a stressful and an emotionally induced situation. So if you really think about it, if somebody had a stroke, heart attack, or if they're on life support, you don't want to have to figure out the court stuff while you're trying to figure out the life stuff. So if you already have those things in place, hey, if this happens, I don't want to be put on drugs. If this happens, I don't want to be on a breathing tube. So it takes the stress and burden off of another person to have to try to make decisions for you, fight for it, figure out how to operate on your behalf. It's already there, and it's really pieces of paper. It's not hard to do. I just told him, I taught this class in my church the other day, even if you don't have a lot of money and you can't afford an attorney, we were talking about the reputable sources online. You can literally go online right now and just it might not be free, it might be like $39.95 or something like that, where you can take the court papers as it is and set up your own directives. So at least you have something. And as your wealth grows, or like I say, you start a business, or you have something it gets too complicated, then you can set aside money to be able to invest in going to an attorney and doing it maybe a more complex way. But you can start today, go online, you can go on the legal, I'll give some references to some of the, companies that have the documents. But the attorney that was on my class last week, what she said, be very careful, because when you do those papers, they are actual legal documents that are created by attorneys. If you alter it and put something in it that's not supposed to be, it can invalidate the whole document. So you just make sure if it asks you step by step, what are your assets, who are you, what you want to have, just only put what it asks you to do. Don't alter the document. So there's different types of powers of attorneys. I'm sure people have seen it, whether it's on TV or have experienced it themselves. The most popular is a financial power of attorney. What do people argue about the most when it comes to family or different things? Money, right? So financial power of attorney means that person who holds that has the authority to make decisions on your behalf, whether it's contractual decisions. It could be just signing a contract on your behalf. It could be, I need to sell or buy a house on property. I get that a lot in the real estate industry, where I have to try to sell property or downsize property while somebody has to be cared for. So it's better to have that already in place because it's very hard to try to do that without you being on the deed or trying to figure it out for yourself. Medical power of attorney, that's another big important one. Any point in time, I always say 1 or 5 things is going to happen to you in a lifetime. You may get sick. 1 out of 5 people get sick at some point. Now, if you're blessed to have the perfect, healthy, wonderful life, God bless your soul. There are some people out there like that. But if you have an accident or get sick and you can't do things for yourself, you need somebody to know what you want done, like I said a few minutes ago. Now, in a power of attorney, there's usually a principal person. It could be more than one person. It just depends on the way that it's set up. Like the way I set mine up, I had, like I said, my best friend and my daughter because I want them to come together to try to figure it out. So it doesn't have to just be, I just have one person making all the decision. If it needs to be, 2 people to put their heads together, you can do that as well. Just make sure the person that you pick, I always say is trusted. You trust them. You trust them with your life for real. That is trusting them with your life. You trust them to make the best decisions so that, let's say if you were in a coma and you came out of it, you want to be able to continue your life and know that everything was done on your behalf and not wake up and say, what happened to my life? What happened to my stuff? They sold my house. They took the money. It happens for real. This type of stuff happens. So you want to make sure trust is key. Make sure they know where to find your documents. Maybe they have a copy of it that you gave them already. That's actually the best way to do it. But just make sure they have access. Now we're in digital age. A lot of our documents are not paper anymore. So back in old banking days, we used to have a safe deposit box. And I used to say, if you have a safe deposit box, make sure you have somebody that's on it that can access it if you can. Because in the bank, we're not allowed to give anybody access. So a lot of times they have to drill into it because there's no way to say you have authority until you get the documents from the court. Then we go back in and drill into it. But if you know somebody, then hey, here's the extra key. Anything happens, this is how you execute. With digital stuff, you need to make sure they have access to your password. So maybe you might want to have a password list. Password to important files to get on to log into certain important sites that are relevant and important if you have to gather information. So you might want to store that separately, maybe somewhere in the cloud or somewhere where that person has that information to be able to log in to get it. So I just talked about this. It could be an agent, could be a family member, spouse, friend, a professional advisor. I just talked about trustworthiness, reliability, them having knowledge of your wishes, ability to handle all the decisions and act when needed. Day-to-day finances is not just what happens to your assets. Your bills still need to be paid. You still got the gas. That don't stop. You already know how the world works. The gas still needs to pay. If you own a home, the utilities still need to be paid. Whatever that is, whether you're incapacitated or gone from this earth. So you just need to have a plan where they can handle all those things for you. They'll oversee the investments, everything I just said, managing bank accounts, safe deposit boxes, and taking over your financial obligations and emergencies. Medical, I just said all this as well, making sure that they understand the clarity of what medical treatments you would or would not accept. Any type of drugs or anything else that would have to be done to your body. Of course, it just makes sure that it aligns with your key, values. The hospital will ask for the documents. Sometimes these documents are important even if you're okay. If you're about to go into major surgery, sometimes they'll ask you for that before you go into major surgery. So if anything goes wrong and you end up in a medically induced coma or anything like that, you want to make sure that there's somebody there or something there to be able to operate on your behalf.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say the practical application is just, God forbid you get in a car accident. And literally, if you don't have any of this documentation, it's going to come back to haunt you, because if you can't make your own decisions and you're in a car accident, and that's just something that could happen to any one of us. So people think, oh, I don't need this paperwork. But a car accident is a perfect example of why you should have this stuff in place.
Doesn't have to be an illness, cancer, or stroke, or heart attack. That's the one that kills people the most is car accidents, especially in this area. We have a lot of car accidents in the DMV region. So if anything, God forbid, we pray the blood of Jesus over us, but if it were to happen, to make sure that we can get through it in a more efficient manner. So the other big thing is outside of this medical power of attorney, a financial power of attorney, it goes a step further. It's called an advanced health director. So an advanced health director drop it off. So advanced health directive is a whole nother document. So that's the document where you can really detail out what you want to happen in each situation. It's kind of like a survey of anything that could possibly happen. And you say what you want to happen in each scenario. So you're detailing out ahead of time. So the person that's executing it, they're not making really decisions. They're just executing what you already have in paper. So it takes the burden off of them. They're just your manager over your life. You're your manager over your health and your finances, and you're just putting it in writing. So I think for those of you who were here yesterday, remember I said with these type of things, your life becomes a business. It's like you're managing your finances and you're managing your life like a business instead of taking the emotion. We talked about emotion yesterday in financial psychology. Like a lot of times we make financial decisions based on our feelings and our emotions, whether we're stressed or strapped for money, whether we have money but we don't know what to do. So in these type of directives, you're managing it. There's nothing that you need to figure out. It's in writing. I've already wrote it out, made it clear. This is what needs to happen in any given situation. So it just gives you a control and a peace of mind that I don't have to worry about it because it's already in writing. It's already being managed.
So I would also add that this is like adulting 101 because all of this paperwork is literally what most people choose never to get around to. Even when you talk about older parents, they pass away with none of this paperwork in place, especially in the Black community.
It's even worse with us. And these statistics that I get are just Americans in general. So with our community, I do a whole class on statistics of where we at in every category in life. And most of them I think almost all of them, we're at the bottom of all these type of things. Health, planning, financial readiness, wealth transfers. We are not doing the things that other races do, like we talked about Jews, Asians, Caucasians, Europeans, how they already have these things. A lot of them, not everybody, but a good percentage of them. This is just clockwork. This is just normal things. They're teaching them to their children at a young age. They're starting off their journey once they get to college. Hey, this is your next steps. So we just need to be doing the same things generationally speaking.
Well, that's why I call it adulting because none of this stuff is going to hurt you. Technically, if you choose to ignore it and you never put this paperwork in place, it does hurt you. So it's adulting because it only aids your life if you choose to get this paperwork done. You have more headaches, you have more drama with the courts, you have more drama with your family members, all because none of this paperwork is done.
Yep, so the revocable trust, so we just said this is why the trust is a complex layered thing. It's not just a trust. We started with the will. We started with the power of attorneys, medical, directives. So now the trust is the owner of all these things. The trust is the entity, which I kind of alluded to when the young lady asked the question. I said you actually set up a trust like you would set up a business. You get your EIN, which is your social security number. So you're birthing your new business. And the trust is going to be the holder and the owner of all things. So the trust is just, like we said, legal arrangement that manages all your access over your whole entire life. So the revocable trust, so there's different trust types, and that's why I break it down so people understand. Revocable means you can continue to, it's a living trust. You can continue to add to, adjust, edit, take away. You just gotta make sure every time you update it, you get it re-notarized, and you make sure you're securing it in a secure place. It makes the transition smooth because you're just managing it like a business. Everything's already ready to go. So like I said, avoiding court, saving money, and preserving privacy. That's the other thing too that I said yesterday, key component, it keeps your details private. So with living wills, you actually have to report that and update with your county, and they keep it in recorder of deeds of wills and trusts. So in that situation, they're keeping it, not trust, but recorder of wills, where they keep it on file and record. The trust, nobody has to know what's dictated. Nobody has to know until it's time to execute it. They don't have to know what the details are. So, for example, like if you're into Lifetime movies, you see the murder mystery, people are killing people to get the inheritance, all that crazy stuff. But in this scenario, if you have it in a trust, they don't know what they're gonna get. They don't know what the directives are, so you can keep it private. It doesn't have to be public record.
I actually had someone tell me that. My barber told me I refused to get, his wife told him that she refused to get life insurance because she doesn't want somebody to try to kill her for it. So the excuse to not have a protection in your life is because somebody else might take it from you.
Yeah, and that's one of those myths that I talked about yesterday with breaking mindset and what people think about things. There are a lot of races and religions and different people that actually believe that I'm not going to get insurance, even though that's the easiest way to transfer wealth, because they feel like, oh, I don't want somebody to get it, I don't want somebody to profit from me, and the other myth is that I don't want somebody to kill me for it, which is stupid. So there are ways to protect your wealth and your assets where that they wouldn't want to threaten you because they're not going to get anything anyway.
Yeah, a lady told me that at a conference just the other day. She said, no one ever gave anything to me, so I refuse to give anything to my children.
So anyway, but that's mindsets. We talked about that yesterday. Breaking through those, I said, your childhood and how you grew up and the people around you kind of influence the way you think about different things, like the myths of estate planning, the myths of getting insurance, how it works, what it can benefit you. But that's what wealthy people have been doing for many, many years. We do a class where we teach the Rockefeller method. Rockefeller has the #1 trust, the highest paid trust, and I know in the United States, I don't know about the world, but in the U.S. But what the Rockefellers started years ago, they just did generation after generation of layering. Everybody has an insurance policy. All the business assets are in the trust. And it just keeps going, keeps going. It was invested year after year. The trust tells it how it's invested, how to keep reinvesting. So I preach about becoming your own bank. They can borrow from the trust. Hey, I want to start another division of the business. I'll repay it, put the money back in so the next generation can do the same thing. And they just keep the cycle going. Their trust was worth, I know about 6 months ago, for $3 trillion.
And it's 17 generations old. So
It's just a business.
you can yeah. I would Google it. The Rockefeller family is of course
Bills was closed, but they fell. So
the
because it has
yes.
to keep going generation after generation, has to keep it going. So if you're teaching your children, every generation just cycles it back. Does the same thing. Hey, you go do this. You start your business. You get your real estate. Put your kids through college. You put the money back in, reinvest it, and it's cycle keeps starting over and over and over again. So that's real generational wealth. People just think sometimes generational wealth is just, I left my policy, one beneficiary, and then it's gone in the first generation. That's not generational wealth. Generational wealth is making sure you're instilling the mindsets, holding somebody in the family accountable to keep the management of the business going. So the process is pretty much, the guarantor is you, whoever, if you're setting up the trust for your family, you become the grantor. So while you're living, you're the grantor. You also appoint a trustee. Now, the rules is if you're still living and it's a revocable trust, the grantor and the trustee can still be the same person. So if you want to be in control and you don't want to appoint somebody, you can continue to manage it as long as you're alive. Then the trustee, in turn, manages the trust, which is still the same cycle. Could be you or somebody else. And then you designate the beneficiary who's going to benefit from whatever the trust is, and that gets distributed to that person. So keep in mind, now once this person goes away, there will be a trustee or a successor trustee that's going to manage on your behalf. So you still want to make sure that person is trustworthy, somebody you believe that's going to operate in your best interest. And even though we talk about more family trust, like I said, if you don't have the type of family that you can trust, you can appoint somebody. It doesn't have to be a family member to be able to do that. But if you do have a strong person, you will want to take that person that's a little bit more structured, going to be a little bit more financial savvy, or make good decisions on your behalf.
Well, the other thing too is the instructions you put in that document are binding. So even if the person, like my trust, my daughter has the ability, but there's a clause in the trust that says if she can consult someone, if she doesn't have the knowledge, right? So understand that this is just a document that you can specify every little detail.
Yep, so during the duration of a revocable trust, you can continue to manage, amend it, update it, add more assets, remove assets, reassign, and keep on changing it as it continues as long as you're alive. Irrevocable is when you, after you die, that means now it can never be changed. It has to be the same the whole way through. The grantor has passed away, whatever the trust is, it has to continue, generation after generation, it cannot change. So they take over the assets, the person that's, the successor trustee, the designated beneficiaries, and they're provided assurance that the wishes are honored. So some people, like he said, he made sure his daughter has to continue the cycle and keep reinvesting. If she has to seek counsel to do that, they keep going and going and going and doing the same thing and repeating it. All right, so I'm gonna stop there. I just wanted to make sure we did just do a brief run through on trust. So this is the time, I told everybody yesterday, housekeeping, you can ask whatever questions you want, just as long as you're not giving your personal details away. You know, that would be for a one-on-one conversation. So does anybody have any questions about the process of will, estate, or trust planning?
It can only be one trustee.
No, that's what I said, it could be more than one, depending on the way you wanna set it up. So if you want a balance, like I said, I like the balance of having two different thoughts that I know that know me, that would execute things the right way.
I do a professional one, then I
You
do
can do
like a
professional.
family member.
Yeah.
Or, you know, how-
That's the way my trust is set up. My daughter is a successor trustee, so she's not the primary. One of the things I hear a lot of people say, like in our community, is I don't have any money to fund my trust. But as she just alluded to, but stopped, where it said life insurance, typically that's what you use to fund your trust. So as soon as you get a policy, the policy or the value of the policy is now the value of your estate. So if you guys didn't know that, you don't need money to fund a trust. When you sign the life insurance document, if it's for $1 million, now you're worth $1 million in your trust.
Yeah, so that was one of the examples I think we gave in savings yesterday, that insurance is one of the smallest ways. So and when you do the insurance policy to trust is the owner of the insurance policy and the beneficiary. So that way you don't have to sit there and laundry list 6 people as your beneficiaries. You had a question, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, if someone reaches past me, you got the money, and you wanted to open up a life insurance, can you do it under that same policy? Or not?
No, it has to be a new policy under your name. Yeah, so it's an inheritance, right? Yeah. So you will have to, you take that money and refund a new investment, yeah. Which is what a lot of ways people do it in the investment. They take the money and they reinvest it in the next family member, yeah.
But that's also succession planning in your trust. There's a clause that's how the Rockefellers did it, right? There's a clause in the trust that says every new baby born will get a life insurance policy from the money that's in the trust, right? So it's when you put those directives in your trust, they don't have a choice. If you prove, like when my mother passed away, MetLife said, prove who you are, and we got a check for you. And it's every month and it's tax-free. So that's the other thing, if you guys didn't know that, when you pass on money through succession, it's always tax-free. So the money my mother left me comes every month and I don't pay taxes on it. It's tax-free.
TK, how did you set it up so we're,
Hit the thing that says input.
and put it right here?
Yep, there it is.
All right, so if you don't have any other questions, I'm gonna move right along, because it was a late start today, we're just gonna keep it moving. So, like I told everybody today, in between now, I'm gonna do it a little less informal, since it's less people. If you have questions along the way, feel free just to say, hey, I have a question, and I'll address it as we go, okay? All right, so part of this journey was, we talked about a lot of things revolving financial psychology yesterday, how to save money and do different things, because being financially stable in your personal life is just as important when you're gonna run a business. So I always say, like, you know, have a good budgeting plan, learn about credit. We do credit classes separate from this, where we just focus on credit, how to do different things to budget, because when you do your business, it's the business of your life as well too. So you wanna have good financial practices when you're in your personal life and adding them to your business as well. Now, how many people in here are possibly looking to start a business one day? Oh, okay, great. Or have a business. All right. Well, starting a business is not easy all the time without the proper information and knowledge. I learned that the hard way. I have been a serial entrepreneur most of my life. It took me a few years before I was taking I felt it was a leap of faith to go all in and leave working full time or whatever I call it my secure paycheck. But back then, we didn't have classes or people going around teaching, not just financial literacy, but also a blueprint. This is what we design, what we do behind our business, because we know there are things that are missing in between. We know, of course, the basics, some of us do, because somebody had to show me when I was 25 years old, they were like, you should have an LLC. I was operating as a sole proprietor under my social. But I was missing all the tax benefits, as a business owner. I was missing a lot of things, but I was a professional. I was in the real estate financing industry. I was in all around finance for about several years before I started my business, but nobody actually said, hey, you work as a contractor, you're doing all these things, you should have an LLC. So along 10 years of my journey, I learned things at different points. You should do this. Maybe you should have a business, savings account, or you should do this. I didn't learn it all at one time. I had to learn it by having good mentors or just figuring out things as I went. Eventually, I did take the trainer class, did other courses, empowered myself. But at the same time, there's not one course or one person that says, go down a checklist and do X, Y, Z. So I don't know if anybody opened their folders today, or if you have your folder, you bring yours back, but I did bring a business checklist today.
It's in the folder.
And some of them got folders yesterday, so I'm just gonna pass it out. But what I did when I started my business in 2013, that was geared towards business consultation and training, is I compiled a checklist, and the checklist might not be the same for everybody, because it all depends on your business type. This is just the basics, the foundational paperwork. But depending on the type of business you have, it might require different licenses, certifications. If you're gonna have a business location, you might need permitting. So there's a whole lot more that's gonna go into it. But I just say, hey, you should at least have I call this the foundational paperwork of your business. You got one thing. Okay.
Yeah, if they have a folder, it's in the folder.
Okay, that's fine. So apart from, I can go into the ideas of how to develop and talk about your business plan and developing your idea of your business. But at the end of the day, I tell people what makes a successful business is everything concerning what we've been talking about. Financial stuff, making sure your paperwork, because what I've learned, there's a barrier to access if you don't have your foundational paperwork in order. So there was an opportunity one time, when I was in my younger years journey, I didn't have my LLC. Somebody wanted to invest in my business, but I didn't have simple things like a business banking account. I didn't have a written business plan. So you want to make sure that if the opportunity arises, hey, I got my business. Now I need to bring in cash flow, but I might be able to get startup money. Well, what they look for is not always, people think it's just I don't have credit or I have credit. It's not just credit. You need to have an efficient business plan. You need to show, hey, this is how my business is going to operate. This is the problem it's solving. This is what the purpose of it is for. And this is how I'm going to bring in money. So you need something to project. This is what's going to happen. So people sometimes, there's many different ways. I'm going to go into more detail about the different types of funding and how you can get money for your business. But for those different types of funding, they require foundational paperwork in order. Hey, well, before we can get started with this loan application, submit to me XYZ. Half of the things on that list is what they look for. Do you have a business insurance? Do you have your articles of incorporation, your state registration forms? If you're a nonprofit, they're looking for your bylaws. If you're a for-profit business, some of them might require an operating agreement, just depends on the business type. Operating agreement may or may not be relevant depending on how many people are involved or what you're doing, if it's a project-based business, so on and so forth. So you just need to know for the business type that you have, what are the things that I need at least foundationally to say, hey, I'm ready. Opportunity, angel investor, I want to get a fund, I want to get a grant. What are the things I need to have? I want to get a government contract, which that gets a little bit more detailed too. But if you have like a guidance or a place to start, it could be very helpful.
I want to also add that a lot of small businesses, for some reason, well, we know the reason, they're missing 90% of the checklist. Like, you opened your business, but when it comes to what, let's say, Fortune 500 company would have, you only have 2 of those checklist items. So the idea is to fill in the gaps, because if you ever scale or if you ever expand your business, and our company fixes that now. We've had 2 clients come to us. One client is in real estate. He's at 30 doors and he wants to scale to 100 doors. The other client is with, what is it called? Fairfax County.
Well, that's one of his contracts. He has multiple contracts.
He has multiple contracts,
Two
but
examples you're giving are actually examples of people that are actually running successful businesses but never did the paperwork right, which is another bad, you're shaking your head because you know it's another bad place to be in. Because they actually have good business, they have good cash flow, or they have their businesses going, but because they're at a point in their business, they're bringing in so much money, they have so many things going on, now they need to go backwards. They're trying to go back to the bank to get maybe some type of gap funding. Both of them are. They're trying to get bridge loans and gap funding. But, okay, before I can help you, what's happening, you know, and they have to go back to the drawing board of what wasn't done in the beginning. So there's a guy, that second guy you're talking about, he has an $800,000 cash flow in his business. But he's at a stuck point because he doesn't have his foundational, he did do the EIN at least. He's like, I got the articles, but he didn't do anything else. So we can't really do anything for him until we get the paperwork right. The other client you're talking about, he had a guy, and we had a conversation last night, I was on the phone with him last night. I don't think maybe the guy was trying to do fraud on him. He has a tax account, I'm trying to fix his taxes. He's about to get liens and levies on his properties. Some of his properties are in the LLC, some of them are not. So he owes tax debt. The IRS is gonna come for the property that he owns in his name. What did I just tell everybody about? About that, if you don't have those things protected, if anything were to happen, it could be taken away from you. So we just wanna make sure that people have, these are real life examples, not just people that just don't have it together. They're actually making money. They're good at what they do, but they don't have their foundational work at all. So he's at risk of losing his assets he already owns. So we have to go back and fix that, make sure the umbrella company is there, and make sure all his assets are underneath the LLCs. That's another layer of layering. So like how we talk about trust with your personal assets, if you have an LLC, you wanna make sure all of your business assets are not in your social security number, that they're inside the LLC for protection. So, you know, that's a good example, CK.
yeah, that's why I said it, because I really
And
want
he
you
has
guys.
everything wrong. Like there's tax issues. He didn't have all his assets in the LLC. He's running into a lot of problems, but he has good cash flow. He has a $3.5 million portfolio, but he can stand to lose that because his foundational paperwork is not in order. So that's why it's important. Yeah, I mean, go ahead and put them over there. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the only reason why I said it, is because a lot of small businesses feel like they don't need this stuff, right? But what happens is when you start to make real money and your business grows, you find out, like she just said in those 2 examples, that you can't grow because you're missing all the stuff that you never paid attention to.
And then not only grow, if you run into these roadblocks, you can lose your assets or not have things in order. Like we were talking about the other guy's taxes too, or in his situation, he's paying people, I said there's no such thing as under the table. So that's a whole nother hurdle to overcome. So making sure you have the proper structures for employee-employer stuff, making sure, you know, the flow through of your money is accounted for, so if you end up in an audit. So there's so many things you have to deal with when your audit is not correct. I tell them you never want to end up in an IRS audit. Because I'm an IRS professional, I worked with many auditors, and it's not a bad situation. When you have a good, successful business, you're gonna have audits. There's nothing wrong with having audits, as long as your stuff is in order or being done the right way. So the first guy's situation is that I don't think his accountant was committing fraud, because he wanted me to talk to his accountant. I said, I'm not gonna do that. Now, it could be 1 or 2 things. Maybe he's just not familiar of how to handle your type of taxes or the portfolio you had in that situation. Maybe they can refer back, but where he lives, because he's in the state of Louisiana, they don't have people that are maybe like around here, we're a little spoiled, because we have people that do more things, so that they have access, or we have access to more. But he is one of the top real estate people in his area. There's nobody doing it on the level that he's doing it on. So an average accountant, that's why I was going to say, when you pick on that checklist, you want to make sure you pick an accountant in an accounting firm that knows your business or familiar with your type of business type. So if you're gonna go into cybersecurity or tech, not to say they have to know your industry per se, but they need to know how to do really good business taxes. You might be an S corp, you might be a partnership, you might be a nonprofit, whatever. You wanna make sure they can handle your tax load. So those are the things you need to think about, because I'm gonna say, if you have a business, how you reporting your taxes can also dictate what money you get when you go for funding.
So nonprofit is considered a business?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, nonprofit is a business. So I just explained, like, having an operating agreement is, did I skip over some? Make sure I didn't go too far. Okay, so before we get to operating agreement, so I just wanted to make sure is when you're starting a business, or you have or you already have the business, make sure you have a written concept of what your mission is, your goals, who is your target audience. You know, I know in some businesses, anybody can be your target audience, but it's better to try to define it on paper. You can have clients outside of that target, but when people are trying to get you funding and to help you with your business, they just wanna know you're clear on how you're gonna, and it's not even just for people and funding, how you're gonna get cash flow. Who is your target audience? Are college students your target audience? Are women your target audience? Are athletes your target audience? Whatever that target audience is for your business or nonprofit, you just wanna make sure you clarify in a written format, more like an executive summary of what you're trying to accomplish. The other big thing is what I just said, making sure you have your logistics, financial projections, to make sure that from the beginning, you have a clear way or a system in how you're going to conduct business and receive monies. So before I do talk about the different types of business and structuring, remember how yesterday I was saying when you're managing your money, this is why I did the money part first. You want to be able to track every dollar that's coming in and out your business. So if you know how to manage your personal life, you want to do the same thing with that business. Have a clear plan for every dollar that's going in and out. A lot of businesses go underwater because they're not planning accordingly. Like they may have something to start with, but they're spending too much and don't have a plan to recoup that money and bring it back in. I said yesterday about people sometimes that are commission-based, you might have a good quarter, you might have a bad quarter, but you need to be able to financially plan that, hey, when I get monies in this quarter, or my busier seasons, I need to be able to pay bills for the next quarter. So you should have a good financial, whether it's a spreadsheet, an app. I said there's apps that are doing it now and helping people with that to be able to track your money, where it's going. Choosing your structure and understanding your structure is just kind of based on understanding what type of business you want to have. So you mentioned having a nonprofit. So nonprofit's going to be more, you're going to be more like probably getting grants and money's coming in where you need to allocate whatever your mission is and whatever purpose you're fulfilling. So, you know, structure for nonprofit would be more like you're not operating for profit. So keep in mind the nonprofit is going to be ran by the monies that are being contributed to that organization and delegated for the different purposes. So that money might be used to pay staff, for salaries, might be used for equipment, materials, whatever you need to operate that nonprofit. So you need to be able to dictate in a financial projection, hey, if I'm going for funding, I need $150,000 for vehicles, I need $20,000 for materials, I need $30,000 for whatever. If you're gonna have operating space, you just wanna dictate all that within your financial projections. Partnership is usually 2 or more people, but it's not the most popular. But partnerships are usually more popular, like with law firms, doctors' offices. I'm not against partnerships, but partnerships still kind of like liability falls on the individuals in the partnership. So I really like LLPs because I like companies where it's still kind of within an LLC structure, but it has the protection of the LLC, but you're still in partnership with the person that's part of that LLC.
An LLP stands for?
Limited liability partnership.
So
But so far it's under LLC type structure. But that's for another class, I'll go into more detail, but the thing is just that, that's why I make sure people understand your structure in which you start your business dictates the protections around your business. Sole proprietor, I don't even have, well, I do have it up there, but it's not something I recommend at all. Sole proprietorship just means you're operating in your name and your social, like I said before, like I started my business day one, eventually became an LLC, but sole proprietor, you have all the liability on yourself. So an LLC is nothing but a limited liability company in a business structure that
What's
combines
that?
partnerships
This one,
and
mine.
corporations.
Is that true?
No, mine had my name somewhere at the bottom.
Oh, it's in the bag. He gave it back to me the same morning. Yeah, in the bag over there. Yeah. So this is where I was saying that in an LLC, you still have elements of partnerships within the LLC, and that's why it's better that the LLC protects
Here it is.
any of your assets in your business.
There it is.
Official.
So if you think about how you just learned about trust, it protects the assets of your personal life. The LLC will protect the assets of your business. So if somebody were to come sue you and say, I want to take, actually, it's not even just lawsuit. You know where I get more popular? Divorce settlements and child support. That's actually more popular. So I had a guy that was worried about that one day. Yeah, he owed like $60,000 of child support. It happens. I see this all the time. I would say child support is even more popular. So say somebody went through a divorce and somebody's trying to come after everything they got. They say, you owe me that. If the spouse is not on the LLC paperwork, they don't have rights to your business. So that means they can take all the personal assets are divided up and the courts can take that into account. But if it's in the LLC, the courts can't touch it. So if anybody can relate to that, then you understand what I'm saying when I say have the partnership in the LLC, because that's why I'd be like, be careful who you partner with, because if you partner and that person has a legal obligation, it could be not just child support, it could be debt collection, lawsuits, whatever that is, or most common things. You don't want the business to be affected by anything that's going on with the personal. So I've seen people owe everything personally, but as long as it's in the LLC and there's a proper way to structure it, you're okay. And on the LLC, it just protects it, like I just said, protects owners from personal liability, offering flexibility in management and taxation. So taxes is key. You know, when I do tax structuring, you want to have a flow through where you can get certain benefits from having a certain business structure type. LLC is very popular because it's just the easiest way to start and get in. You know, I'm going to go into corporations and S corps. There's different rules surrounding those, but LLC is like, okay, you're still in control, but you're not a sole proprietor. It's not in your name. Your business is running itself. You can have multiple LLCs. You just don't have that one. That's what I like about LLC. You can open 10 LLCs for different purposes. You can have a healthcare company. You can have a management company. You can have a subsidiary company to the company you're already doing and just create an LLC just for that purpose or project. So there is no just like you just one business and that's it. Also, I don't have it here, but in tax world, there are codes, we call them NAT codes. It determines what type of business you're running. So you should legally have, like let's say you're running a hair salon, you shouldn't have a hair salon and a law office in the same LLC. Tax world and legally, that's not really acceptable. So that's why you have to have different LLCs sometimes for different purposes. So just make sure whatever things you're doing under that one LLC, it should be similar services. So if it's all healthcare related and it's different things under healthcare, you may be able to get away with just having one LLC. If it's a consulting business and it's very similar in the activity you're consulting on, then you can have one LLC.
I also add that in that structure, the naming convention is very important too, because if you ever go for funding, the bank looks at that. Your naming convention can't be, the stuff that you hear in our community. It has to be something substantial related to your industry, because that's what they use with the NAT code in association with deciding whether or not you get funding. So sometimes people come up with these cute names and they exclude themselves from real business.
Yep, so your name is important, so make sure you choose your name wisely, but make sure it caters to what you're trying to do, what you're trying to project. An operating agreement, I did kind of allude to this earlier, you should have an operating agreement. I would say if there's more than one person involved, so that way you can dictate each person's role, if you're the founder, CEO, president, manager of this person, COO, whatever. So it establishes the percentage of ownerships, if there is money earned, how it's going to be distributed evenly or unevenly, whatever percentages you decide to do between all the partners. So you don't want to have to go to court. You want to make sure this is dictated from the very beginning. If it's a 50-50 partnership, then that's really flat out easy. It's just 50-50, everything is returned 50-50, everything goes out 50-50. But sometimes it can get complicated. People can have 4 people on a company, but it might be 2 25% owners, and the rest might be smaller owners, maybe a percentage. So you really wanna be careful about how you dictate how those percentages are paid out. So that way you don't have any issues down the line, hey, look, we got the operating agreement, we don't, it's just like the trust. We don't need to go to court, because we signed an agreement that already dictates what needs to happen. So that takes the mental stress of having to fight if anything happens down the road. You never know, I've been in companies with people and things, you could be the best of friends or have an idea and wanna do things together, but then when money gets involved, things can change. So no matter what, even if you trust a person to the fullest, always sign a contract. I used to go to cons all the time, and they'd be like, I did a handshake. That's the old school way. I said, yes, I understand what you're saying. You did the old school handshake. I had a guy, he's like from, I call him the OG. I was like, yeah, that's the old school, but you gave this person $50,000 of your money. You didn't get a signed contract. That person disappeared, or didn't do what they were supposed to do with the investment. It was a real estate investment. He was like, I'm ready to take it to the streets and just have somebody go out. I said, that's not the way to do it. But going forward, just make sure I don't care if you're paying a contractor, you had a contractor fixing up one of his restaurants, have them sign something, have paperwork. The contractors took the money, but they didn't finish the work. So any of those scenarios, you wanna always have a signed agreement or a signed contract. And I think I mentioned most LLCs, any small businesses fall under LLCs, startups, real estate investments. Real estate investments was the example of the guy I just told you. He has 26 properties and 10 of them are in his name, and he's facing possible tax levy. So you wanna make sure all these things, whatever type of business you go into, it's all within the LLC. The next step is you need to register. That's what, I think I have that as the first step on the list. So if you already have the name and you have the idea, before you do anything transactional wise, I always tell people, see, this is the mistake a lot of black people make. They're like, I'm gonna wait till I make some money and then I'll set up the business. No, you should have a plan already before a dollar goes in and a dollar goes out. The only dollar that should go out first is the money you pay for the registration of your business. That's it. Because once you have it set up and you have the business bank account in place, you keep track of every dollar that's going in and out. You want to not have to go backwards going, hey, I gotta file my taxes for my business so the multiply for funding, but it's commingled in my personal bank accounts. I pay cash for some things. I don't know what's going on. You need to have the plan first. Have the plan set up so that way when money's coming in, now things are already set up. If you have an idea and say the investor walked in tomorrow that's gonna fund your idea, did you even do this part first? Don't go backwards. I have a lady that came to me a few days, she needs a grant, and I'm like, but now the Prince George's County is like, they have the money, they have the whole thing ready for her to go. She didn't do the LLC paperwork yet. She's been operating under a name that wasn't even registered. I said, first we gotta make sure the name is available, so people don't think about that. They come up with a name, but if registration doesn't even guarantee the name, at least registration will get you your place. But there's a step further, you could trademark, meaning nobody else could ever get your name anywhere in the country. But at the minimum, register, because if it's not registered inactive, and the reason I enforce that is because you could have a business, but if you let it go inactive, then the business is not valid anymore. Inactive means maybe in like this area, DC and Maryland, it's a $300 a year personal property tax to keep your business up every year that you have to pay. A lot of people don't know that. So they might say, hey, I opened my business up in 2024, but we go into DC, we go into Maryland, it's showing it's in default, it's inactive, or it's gone already. That means somebody can take that name and reuse it. So it's important, if you have a name, she was already floating the name out there, you didn't even register it yet, so let's get it registered. But now you're trying to beat time because you already started another process where somebody's ready to give you a contract, and you don't even have your paperwork ready. So you don't wanna be in that situation, you just wanna be ready to go. Licenses and permits, just because of the type of business you're going in. Of course, if you're a hairstylist, you need to have the license necessary for that. If you're gonna have a physical location, sometimes it requires you, like if you're doing educational, childcare, there's definitely strict rules around childcare facilities. You wanna get ahead of that ahead of time because permitting can slow up your process. And understanding local regulations, understanding the zoning, especially in this region because we're so federally zoned. I ran into situations where if you have a business close to a federal property, there's different requirements and different things you have to do that you can or cannot do. So just be familiar with where you're opening your business. Maybe go to a licensed professional that can help you navigate these things or that are familiar with the local permitting offices. And just make sure that it won't be a hindrance to what you're trying to do in your business. All right, anybody got any questions? Mr. OG, you got any questions today? I wanna make sure I'm keeping you awake. I told you I want y'all to interact anytime, stop me. Yep.
So you gave an example of a young lady who was applying for a grant but didn't do the full sample of registration. How did you, or did that situation get resolved? How did you navigate?
Yeah, I had to help her go backwards and fix her paperwork and get that all straight.
So once all of that was done, she was able to get the
Yeah,
grant?
she was able to go forward in with whatever process she was doing to obtain the grant, yeah. But in some situations, it's really sad, like the person that had the contract or already ready to go to BG, you know, you just wanna be ready, that's not always happening. You have, just because you apply for a grant doesn't mean you won't get it. But at least, if you have most of that stuff set up in the right way, you have, of course, you have to do that and even to get. Our grant writers will tell me every day, be like, I can't even help nobody until they do that first. We can't even have the conversation because we gotta have the minimum, because there's a lot of stuff that goes into grants, research, I have a whole thing I'm talking about grants, that it's even more intricate than just applying for a business loan. So you wanna at least have the basic, that's why I said that foundational checklist paperwork at least done at the minimum. And then whatever else, because every grant might require something different, so you wanna make sure you have most of which, what, you know, normally that people would want or things are required for that particular grant.
Also, what about have you ever experienced a person who had the, let's say they set their business in, let's say, '05, and laws have changed since then? So, this new law that's going out, if you have the LLC, then you have to pay that personal property tax, that's a recent law. For that person who had the business in '05, but now that they have, they can keep their taxes and it went into default, and the business is now inactive. What do you do in a situation like that?
I have it all the time. It happens all the time. So I give them two options. Either pay, I think I told the girl that was sitting here yesterday, she was studying something similar, like her business may have been inactive. I mean, it depends on how much, this is where I start from. How attached are you to the name of the business? The person that was here yesterday said the business name was in her actual name. So, meaning like, did you have, let's say when they had that business, not even just attached to the name. Like, you know, when you build a business, you're building something. So maybe what you had attached to that business is what people recognize. It's your brand, it's your value. Maybe they were already generating revenue through the recognition of that business entity. That's why I said the name is not just the name. Through that name, I was bringing in $10,000 a month, or I had people that were supporting me under that business name. Now, that doesn't mean you can't change a business name. Businesses go through changes all the time, where they can merge with another company, get taken over another thing, or rebrand. But is the rebranding process worth paying? That's what the question you have to ask, the back taxes. Some people might say, I really wanna keep that name. That was my bread and butter, that was my baby. I operated under ABC company for 20 years before it went inactive. I wanna keep, that's the recognition brand. That's what people know me by. So it's like BT, say BT changed their name to a different type of company. Will we recognize it? Will we support it, you know? Most situations I see in that, most of those people aren't connected to the brand. They just let that go, or it wasn't really moving. Because if it's really moving, yeah, they kept it going on. So in my situation, pick a new name. It could be a deviation of that if it's available. Sometimes the state will take, like, okay, say it was so-and-so limited liability company, they might take a different, like, you can keep some of the name, maybe just change it a little bit, and they might reapprove it. So that's my recommendation, just start over. Yeah, I actually went through that at one point years ago where I had to, like, depending on, like, okay, how many years back, I was about to get another SBA loan, I just went ahead and paid it because the SBA was gonna give me a certain amount of money. So it just made financial sense to go ahead and pay it because I was getting ready to get the money back because of what they were going to offer me, so. Yep, just all depends. I know a lot of, I go through this all the time, I'm a tax pro, so that's a common thing. My thing went inactive, and unfortunately, this area is expensive, it's $300 a year, you know. Virginia's not as expensive, you know. All right, so we're kind of getting into what I was talking about with funding, you know, what's your best funding option? You know, when you sit down and have that conversation, so once you've done your paperwork, once you got everything in order, the next question is what money and how do what monies make sense for the business I'm about to do? Because all funding might not make sense. It's customizable based on what you're trying to do. You don't want to put yourself, like, funding doesn't necessarily have to be debt. There could be good debt and there could be bad debt. That's going to get you what you need to start to produce money. That's good debt. Because if you need money to pay for staff, you need money to pay for equipment, whatever your business is and what that requires, it may be more best to get that money up front and get as much funding as possible up front, so you're not strained while you're doing your business, and in the middle of running your business, you run into a roadblock where I can't sustain or go forward because I don't have enough money. Usually in any business where a person starts in the first year, it's usually money going into the startup, so you're not really making much of a profit. But while you're growing your business, you don't have to worry about, I don't have enough money to do X, Y, Z, or I don't have enough money to do the next thing I need to do. So you want to have a plan, because before you go before a funder or business lending, they're going to ask you, how much loan are you trying to get? It's not their job to figure it out. You can't go into the bank and say, okay, people come to the bank and I'm trying to get a loan. Okay, what's the target number? What is the amount of money you're trying to qualify for? And that number should be based upon your plan. Hey, I know to stay operating a business for a year, to rent, let's say you're leasing space and it's $2,000 a month. Maybe you need to multiply your first year's rent. How much money realistically, you should have an outline of equipment, materials, phones, whatever, utilities. This is my target number. That doesn't mean you're always going to get all the funding you want or you need. You should at least have that number and have a plan on how you're going to get the rest. So funding can be different factors decide what type of money you're going to get. It could be the stage of your growth. Now there are startup funds that you can obtain. SBA does have opportunity for that. There are some lenders. When I was at the bank, we would do up to $25,000 for startup businesses. Just as long as you have that foundational paperwork and some of the projections, they'll be able to tell you. Sometimes it does rely on it, and most times, this is why I did the personal finance side yesterday, credit worthiness. So sometimes if you're a startup business and say you're the LLC owner, they might look at you as what's called the guarantor of your own business. So if they're going to secure funding for you, that's why yesterday I went into managing your personal finances. They want to see how you've been dealing with and managing your personal finances. How quickly you need capital. Now, with people that don't have their credit together, that's what I said, I have the whole credit program. We have companies that we refer to and say, hey, go to this person, they're gonna help you build your credit. But in the meantime, you still need to be doing all these things and seeking what's your best option and knowing how much money you're trying to get. And sometimes it is if you're willing to give up equity. So what that means is sometimes lenders that are gonna fund you, they wanna see how much skin in the game do you have. So everybody that starts a business necessarily doesn't have a stock full of money saved up. But hey, what are you giving up? What do you have that's of value? Sometimes it could be leveraging or collateralization. Collateralization is just basically leveraging something you have to be able to say, hey, I have this, and I'm going to give you a loan based on the asset. Most people might be real estate. Some people could be something like a bank account or long-term savings. I talked about long-term savings yesterday because, like, say you came from a job and you had a 401k. There is $50,000 sitting in the 401k. Now, you might want to pull. I don't want to advise anybody to pull out of their long-term savings. That's the last thing I would advise somebody to do. But they can leverage it, collateralize it, and say, hey, this is a fixed asset. We'll give you a $50,000 line of credit based on the fact that you have this asset sitting here and you're not going to use it, and they'll lock it up. But that asset continues to grow. All right, so does anybody have any questions about some of the things they consider when you're trying to get business lending? So business lending is my specialty. I used to do that for many years, small business lending and banking and underwriting. So what I try to do, because we can't do it all in this class, like I do detailed, assessments, classes, one-on-ones, to try to help people, but it's not, sometimes they're not always looking at just your credit score. They're looking at different things. So that's why we try to develop your personal portfolio while you're starting your business, so that way they can see, well, this person pays their bills on time, this person does that, and then there's different types of lenders. There's private, we call it private money lending. That's non-traditional, meaning you're not going to the bank and dealing with the bank traditional, or we call it conventional rules. A private money lender could just assess your situation and decide if they want to take that risk based on other factors. It might not be credit. Now, I will say most of them do want to see, hey, at least something in credit. But there are some people that say, hey, I like the idea. I think it's going to be profitable. I like your plan. I've seen a case study where if you execute it, this will work. Hey, I'm going to take the leap of faith and do that. So there are opportunities outside. I say if you have bad credit, I'm not saying that you're going to get everything you need, but there are still some options. But in the meantime, I encourage you to work on it, All right, anybody have questions? Cause I don't want nobody falling asleep